Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to 20 Tips in 20 Minutes. It says Microsoft Flow, but the name change happened on Monday, so I'm still digesting it, but it's Power Automate, and the processes are Flow. So you are at the right session. So what we're going to do this afternoon is I'm going to talk about a 6-step process for building effective and efficient flows that are going to run reliably and perform your intended business function for your enterprise. And they're going to run at scale so that they work over and over and over again, and you don't have any unfortunate failures. When you use this 6-step process yourself, or when you take it back to your office and share it with others on your team, you will be happier. A little bit about me. I'm a solution architect at Campus Management. We're an ISV. We build solutions for the higher education marketplace. I'm the Flow guy, probably be the Power Automate guy when I get back. And we use Flow extensively for doing integrations between files that the universities get for SAT scores, Common App applications, ACT scores, and pull them into the Dynamics platform where we run our Engage solution. I've been working with the Dynamics platform for 16 years. Started with Flow 2.5 years ago when it was in preview, and I've been doing a lot with Flow and the Dynamics 365 platform. You can find me on LinkedIn at Jerry Weinstock. I'm the guy with the water skiing picture out there. So there's a white paper that this presentation is based on. I'm also giving a 45-minute breakout session on Friday if you want to come back for more. The white paper you can find by just looking for a guide to building enterprise-ready flows, or use the aka.ms link. If you want to talk about what it takes to author a white paper for Microsoft and get it done, come and see me after the session there. It was quite a uphill experience, but a very satisfying one. So any good project starts with planning. Let's kick it right off there. So in a flow, all you need is a trigger and an action. Your flows do not have to be complex. As you start thinking about what you're going to do, think small, think simple whenever possible. Is this action necessary? Could I do it some other way? Number 2, when you build flows, if you use the Flow UI, they just stack up. There is no window file explorer look in terms of putting them into files, things of that nature. So what you'll need to do with your team to keep things organized is to build out a descriptive naming convention that everybody in the organization follows. So when someone else on your team or in the support group or even your customers, if you're an ISV or a partner, they need to look at the flow. They know from its description what it does. Don't use a license plate approach for naming flows. Whether it's sales, dash, whatever, project service, whatever, make something uniform and do it that way. So back sort of to the planning process. When you open up the Flow UI, it's easy to start in there just pointing and clicking and doing triggers and actions. Don't do that. Go to the edit page, and in the description area, write out what you think your flow is going to do, the steps and the purpose. And then keep that updated. And as you release new versions, put in a time or date stamp and tell somebody, yourself or anybody else that's going to go back to that, what you did at that step. One of the things that you're going to learn is when you're in the Flow UI, there is no undo, redo step. And there's no process like you can do in Word and some of the other applications. There we go. So it's very easy to open up a flow and get it messed up and go, uh-oh, okay? Document, think ahead, plan ahead. A lot of what you're hearing is based upon personal experience. Okay, so as you insert cards or actions, if you have an action that says, when a record is selected, and then you go update a record, update a record, update a record again, it's going to just number them 2, 3, and so on. You need to label them and rename them accordingly on what the intended purpose of that action is as you're doing that. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to find them in the dynamic content listing, which can get very long if you have lots of actions. At Campus Management, some of the integration flows that we have up to 500 actions in them. They are humongous, okay? You're going to get lost. So rename them. When you open up the card and you rename it, you can also add a little comment in there. Click on the 3 little dots and you can put a little description there. So if you're a developer, this is where you put your comments in there. If you're a citizen developer, this is how you document your work. So when you come back to the flow next week, a month later, 3 months later, it's not just a bunch of cards there. It tells you what's going on. You don't need to create a separate Visio diagram. Do it this way. It will work. Okay, so now we've done some basic planning. Let's think about some designing and making tips. So I've got a list records where I'm going out to the Common Data Service and I'm retrieving records for an email campaign that I want to kick off using Flow, and I want to send out emails. So I'm checking for status code. In other words, I just want active records, but I'm missing something. Down here in my loop, where I'm going to loop through all the records I've retrieved, I'm going to have, does it have an email address field filled in? Don't do it that way. Put all your conditions and your filtering in your list, and don't loop through a lot of records that you don't need to do. Now, in this particular case, there is another scenario. I'll give you that scenario real quickly. Let's say you have a file of records, and you want to go through, and those that have an email address, you want to send out to your email campaign and send them a notification or an SMS text message. And those that don't have an email address or a text mobile phone number, you want to put them in a condition check down here and send them off a different path, and maybe write them to an Excel file so that you can follow up with them with snail mail or a telephone call or some other process to come back and enrich their records, assign it to users. So there are times when you want to put some additional condition checking in your loop, but otherwise keep it out of the loop. If there's any tip that's more important than the others, it's configure run after. Just don't create flows that handle the happy path. Stuff happens, things go wrong. You need to handle what's going to happen if a field is missing that you need. You need an escape path, and what are you going to do? In this particular example, we're doing an approval. We send out a conditional approval to a person. They need to respond in 1 week. If they don't respond in 1 week, the flow is going to fail. Nothing else is going to process. So we need something in there using the configure run after that says has timed out, and now I'm going to run down a path that says, okay, do this. Escalate it to this person's manager, approve it automatically. If they didn't get back, and approve it within the 7 days, some other course of action. Otherwise, all the downstream actions will fail and will not be processed. So when you're building a flow, you do not need to build all the steps out from start to finish and then say, okay, I'm ready to test. You can sort of use like agile method of doing this. So you can build in your trigger and a few actions, and then if you want to say, oh, wonder how things are working out, what's the output from this step? Okay, for example, if you're going to do something with a source that you're not that familiar with the API in terms of the values that it's bringing back, stick in a send an email notification step, okay? And then put the fields in that notification, and then when it runs, you can see what the output looks like, and say, oh, okay, that's what the timestamp looks like. That's the format. Now I know how to parse it in the next step. When you're done, just remove those, but build it. So think about iterating, validating, and then extending and expanding and building it out entirely. It doesn't have to be done all at one time. So some connectors don't have the ability to listen for an event. They don't have the way of, there's no triggering capability from that perspective. They just have actions. When you have a connector that does that, then you need to use a recurrence, and you have to say, okay, every so often I want to trigger this flow and look at all the following actions and execute them. So when you open up the recurrence and you initiate it, it defaults to 1 minute, which is kind of handy when you're in a testing mode because it runs quite frequently. But don't leave it in that mode and go away. I wouldn't know what I'm talking about there, because when you come back a day later or 2 days later, a month later, and it's run 300,000 times, it's not a happy situation, because under the new licensing program, you're going to get a little notification that you made a little too many API calls. So when you use recurrent self-control, when you're done with it, make sure you set it to the minimum requirements in terms that you can get away with. Don't make it any more frequently needs to be. If you want to keep it at 1 minute because you're done testing for the day, make sure you turn it off, because this will bite you. I know. So once again, kind of like with configured run after, Flow doesn't like null values. It doesn't know what to do really except go belly up. So when you see this little kind of pink message, something went awry and you had something missing from your source data field. In this particular case, it says it cannot be evaluated because property email does not exist, okay? So think about things that could go wrong, plan for the unexpected. So if you're an administrator at your organization and you've enabled people in your organization to become makers, and you're in a review process, when you open up the flow that they've done, or they show it to you and say, can I push this out, or you're doing lunch and learns, ask them if they've considered things that can go wrong. What's the unhappy path? How are you dealing with it? Make sure they've dealt with it in the flow, because the flow's going to run, it's going to fail, and there's going to be some expected business action that was supposed to happen that maybe they depended upon or other people in your organization were depending upon that's not going to happen. It's going to be silent. And you're not going to know about this until somebody happens to go back to the flow.microsoft.com or now powerautomate.microsoft.com and sees that there's a whole slew of failed runs. So there are execution limits. If you go to docs.microsoft.com or if you do a search and go today, probably just Microsoft Flow execution limits, it'll take you right to the doc page. In a little while, it'll probably be Power Automate limits. There are limits and you need to understand these so you build your flows within the constraints. So one of the ones that we deal with is the number of action cards that are available within a flow. Now on the logic apps level, for which flow is based on, you can have 500 action steps. But if you go to the flow documentation, it says 250. You have to stick with what flow says. Can you do more than 250? Probably. We're doing it. We're doing up to 500, quite frankly. But we know we're in the area of, well, probably the product team didn't test more than 250. So if we call for support, they're going to look at it and say, this thing is 5 miles long, and they'll know right away that we're over the limits. So in our case, we're now built with child workflows that are available, child flows that are available. We'll be able to break that down into smaller flows. But understand the limits in terms of the number of executions that you're allowed per time period, nesting levels, and other considerations. It's on one page at the docs.microsoft.com site. Dynamic content. Okay, so avoid hard coding values like email addresses in your flow, because when you go to share them, they're not going to be transportable. So use something like the Outlook Get My Profile. You can get the maker, you can get the person that's running the flows, email address and other information about them. You can get their information and then get their manager's information, and your flow will then become transportable and work across your entire organization. Variables and compose. If you're going to use a value in the flow and it's not going to change, use the compose statement rather than variables. Use variables for things that are going to change during the flow. You're going to add, subtract, you need to parse them, things of that nature. Why? Because compose is a little bit more efficient for the back-end engine to run than variables, and at 25 billion, not million, 25B, action runs per 24 hours in the flow system, every little bit helps. Doesn't make much of a difference to me and you, but makes a lot of difference to the people that run and own the engine. You can get yourself in trouble very easily with flow. I've got a trigger that says when a record is updated, update that same record. How many times can this run? Maybe 400,000 times in a 24-hour period. Oh, and then if you're really not so smart, you have a step down there that says, oh, just send an email to me. I can tell you that when you call up Office 365 support and they've locked you out, no amount of begging and groveling will get you back in to being able to send outgoing email periods within that 24-hour period. And I've got a little bit longer story on Friday. I can talk about that if you want to come back. This is painful. So when you were at breakfast and lunch this morning, if you were like me, you started at the line and you just started piling on stuff at every station, and you got to the end of the line, you figure out when I get to my seat, I'll have to determine actually what I'm going to eat. Don't do that with flow. Treat it like a menu, not a buffet. Okay? Make sure you've got the filtering in there. You can use conditional statements. You can use fetch XML. You can use the top count. But only take what you need. It's going to run faster. It's going to run more efficiently. It's very important when you're using recurrences, but because it's not handy if you're doing a recurrence and your flow is still running while the next recurrence kicks off, okay? Testing. The flow testing engine is very powerful. If you're coming from the Dynamics 365 classic workflow area or maybe even other environments, testing was somewhat cumbersome. So when you create your flow and you want to run it, you put it in the test mode, and if you go, I'll perform the trigger action, it will immediately start listening for an event. So you go over to your source environment, you create a record, you update a record, you change something, and it'll fire off immediately. It won't wait a minute or 2 minutes, depending upon whatever the triggering timeout is set up for. If you run it, you're going to see a series of runs in there, and you select the second button, and you can rerun a previous run. Maybe you tweak something in the flow to change an item, you fix something up in the source database, you can run it again and see if it runs successfully. Lastly, if you work a lot in Office 365 and Outlook, you don't have to do anything. You can just say, hey, grab the latest piece of information that came in, a task, appointment, an email that you're triggering on, and grab that and use that in my testing environment. Sometimes when you're creating a flow, you don't know exactly what you want your triggering event to be. It could be a create, update, a delete. You don't know what combination. Stick a button in there. This also makes it handy because then you don't have to feed anything into the source environment. You can just press the button in the UI. It'll kick off and it'll perform the other actions. Now, it won't work if your other actions are dependent upon some information from the triggering event, but that's not always the case. So this can speed up the process. Start off with the button, remove the button, and put in the correct trigger when you're ready to go. Deployment. So if you work in the common data service area, you want to build your flows inside a solution. How many, raise your hand if you work with CDS here. Okay, good. I've got a little bit of news for you here today. So when you work within CDS, you get the CDS new environment triggers and actions. They're more powerful than the regular common data service triggers and actions. But that's changing. So got approval from the product team to let you know that if you're accustomed to using this new environment connector, you no longer have to use it just within solutions. It is available outside of solutions starting in the next week or two. It's on the train and it's going around to the different stations throughout the world. But the new environment triggers and actions will be available in the MyFlow UI. So if you create a flow, or one of your makers in your organization creates a flow, and you want to share it with other people, don't share it with individuals, share it with an Office 365 group. It's a lot easier to maintain, it's a lot faster, it's a lot easier to handle in Office 365. As people come in and out of that group, they'll automatically get the flow. So wrapping it up here a little bit with troubleshooting. Back when I was a kid, you go out at lunchtime in elementary school, you hit this round, bouncy ball, and you're on the baseball field, and if somebody rolled the ball to you, then you'd kick it, and you could run the bases and so forth. And then every once in a while, the ball would roll toward you, be pitched toward you, it wouldn't be a good pitch, and you'd call for a redo. Well, we have a redo in flow also, just like that. So if you're looking at your history of runs and you see a failed run, you can see what caused the run to fail. You can potentially go out to the source and fix it. Maybe it's a record or a row in the source, or maybe the source file wasn't there at all. The person that was supposed to drop it in there, or the process that was supposed to drop it in there in the Azure File Services area or put it in OneDrive didn't happen. Fix that part of it, and then hit the resubmit button. It will resubmit and run just that particular flow for that particular record or that particular file. Very easy to correct things that have gone wrong. So your flow's out there in the wild, it's running. I don't like to cry. And what you need to do is take your flow and use the export to zip capability and download that to your local machine, your code repository area, Azure DevOps, whatever you're doing. So if these flows are not going as part of a solution in terms of your common data service, if they're working in the Office 365 area or in SharePoint, things of this nature, and that's what they're running against, make sure you're keeping a backup copy. Because if they're a team flow, anybody you shared the flow with as a potential maker, they can go in and edit it. And it's very easy to mess this stuff up because you can go in there, start clicking and things of this nature, and your only choice is to hope you didn't accidentally click on save, and they click on cancel instead, and then they go back to the original and so forth. So it's very difficult to roll this back. Export to a zip file. I got a tip from Audrey Gordon, and she's on the community team. What she does is she exports these to a zip file, and she puts them in a file folder structure for her OneDrive account. So that's the way she organizes her files, so she has it for various demos she's given, for training classes, for customer work, or just general experimentation. The white paper is out there. It's got 80 plus pages in it with a lot of pictures and arrows and diagrams and some wording and tips. You can use this as a foundation of a lunch and learn, training documentation, required reading. Have fun with it. If you want to contact me, you can find me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter. Please evaluate the session, tell me how I did, good, bad, or ugly, would appreciate it. And the slide deck is out there on the tech community site. Anybody have any questions, concerns? Feel free to come up after the session. Thank you very much.